Today we're covering a very important update from the Department for Work and Pensions, better known as the DWP. This is a story that could affect millions of people across the United Kingdom, especially those who currently receive certain benefits. Over the next couple of years, there will be big changes as 4 long-standing benefits, often referred to as legacy benefits, are phased out and replaced fully by universal credit. The government has set a clear deadline for this transition, which is March 2026, and that means every single person still on these benefits will eventually need to move across. Now, before we dive into the details, I want to remind you that this channel, Pensioners Corner, is here to keep you informed in a safe and straightforward way. We don't use scary headlines and we don't promise things that can't be guaranteed. What we do is break down the news in simple language so you can understand how it might apply to you or your loved ones. If you find this kind of information useful, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell icon so you don't miss future updates. Let's start with the basics. The government has already ended some benefits in the past, such as working tax credit and child tax credit. These have been absorbed into universal credit, which has been slowly rolling out since 2013. But now, the focus is shifting to 4 more benefits. By March 2026, the following will come to an end: Income-Related Employment and Support Allowance, often shortened to ESA, Income Support, Income-Based Job Seekers Allowance, or JSA, and Housing Benefit, except for those who live in supported or temporary accommodation. If you currently receive any of these payments, it is very important to understand that they won't continue forever. At some point before March 2026, you will receive what is called a migration notice from the DWP. This is an official letter instructing you to apply for universal credit by a certain date. Normally, people are given about 3 months from the date of the letter to make their application. During that period, your existing benefits continue as usual. But once the deadline passes, if you haven't applied, your old benefits will stop. That means your payments could end even if you're still entitled to support. This is why migration notices should not be ignored. They are your official instruction to take action, and missing the deadline has serious consequences. It's not meant to scare people, it's simply how the process has been set up. Now, let's talk about something that often confuses people: transitional protection. This is a safety measure designed to make sure that those who move to universal credit are not worse off straight away. For example, if you currently get more from your old benefits than you would under universal credit, the DWP will provide a top-up payment to cover the difference. This ensures that you don't suddenly lose money the moment you switch over. However, transitional protection only applies if you apply within the deadline given in your migration notice. If you miss it and try to apply later, you will still be able to claim universal credit, but you'll be treated like a brand new applicant. That means no transitional top-up, and you might find yourself receiving less than before. Understandably, many people worry about whether universal credit will leave them worse off in the long run. According to the DWP, most people moving across will get the same or even more than before, depending on their circumstances. Universal credit works by starting with a standard allowance, the base payment, and then adding extra elements depending on your situation. If you have children, pay rent, live with a disability, or a health condition that affects your ability to work, you may qualify for additional amounts. Of course, everyone's situation is different. That's why it's strongly recommended to use a benefits calculator online or to speak with a qualified welfare advisor before your deadline. That way, you'll have a clearer picture of how much you might expect and what kind of support you could receive. Something else worth noting is that if you decide not to act when you first receive your notice, you're not locked out forever. You can still apply for universal credit later, even after your old benefits stop, but as I mentioned earlier, doing so after the deadline means you won't receive transitional protection. For some households, that could make quite a difference to monthly income. So, why is the government making this change? Officially, the aim is to simplify the welfare system by bringing 6 separate benefits into one monthly payment. The argument is that it reduces complexity, cuts down on administrative costs, and makes it easier for claimants to manage their finances. It's also supposed to help reduce fraud and errors by having one centralized system. However, not everyone agrees that the transition has been smooth. Charities and advocacy groups have raised concerns that some people may fall through the cracks, especially those with disabilities, health issues, or limited access to the internet. Since much of the universal credit system is online, those who aren't confident using technology can find the process overwhelming. In addition, there have been reports of migration notices arriving late, going to the wrong address, or containing unclear instructions. That's why it's so important to keep your details up to date with the DWP and to check your post regularly. Let's take a closer look at the application process itself. For most people, applying for universal credit is done online. You'll need an email address and access to the internet. The application requires you to provide information such as proof of income, rent details, identification documents, and bank statements. Once your claim is submitted, there is usually a wait of around 5 weeks before you receive your first payment. In the meantime, you might be eligible for an advance payment, but this works like a loan and will be deducted from future payments. Another change people need to prepare for is the payment schedule. Some legacy benefits were paid weekly or fortnightly, but universal credit is paid monthly. For people already finding it difficult to budget, this shift can be challenging. The good news is that there are options available. You can ask for alternative payment arrangements, such as splitting payments or having them more frequently in certain cases. Local citizens' advice offices and universal credit advisors can provide guidance on this. Now, let's talk about timing. Although March 2026 might sound far away, the migration is already underway. Different areas are being targeted at different times, so some people may get their letters sooner than others. Just because you haven't received anything yet doesn't mean you won't soon. That's why it's best to be prepared in advance. Here are the key points to remember. 4 benefits: income-related ESA, income support, income-based job seekers allowance or JSA, and housing benefit, except for those who live in supported or temporary accommodation, are ending by March 2026. Everyone receiving them will get a migration notice telling them to move to universal credit. If you apply by the deadline, your payments will continue and you may get transitional protection to prevent a sudden drop in income. If you miss the deadline, your benefits will stop and you'll lose the right to that extra protection. So what can you do right now? First, make sure the DWP has your correct address and contact information. Second, keep an eye out for official letters and don't ignore them when they arrive. Third, if you're unsure about how universal credit might affect you, speak to a benefits advisor or use a reliable benefits calculator online. And finally, give yourself time. Don't leave things until the last minute. It's also worth remembering that you're not alone in this process. Many organizations, from local councils to national charities, are offering support to help people through the transition. Whether it's help filling out forms, budgeting advice, or just explaining how the system works, there are resources out there. At Pensioners Corner, our goal is to make sure you know what's coming so you can make informed decisions without stress. These changes are significant, but with the right preparation, you can move through the process with more confidence. If you found this explanation helpful, please consider subscribing to Pensioners Corner and tacking the notification bell so you don't miss future updates. Sharing this video with friends and family is another way to make sure no one misses out on important updates. Thank you very much for watching. Stay safe, stay informed, and remember, knowledge really is power when it comes to protecting your income. This has been Pensioners Corner, and I'll see you in the next update.